Good Monday. Hello, I'm Dan Murrell, here with another week of Charting with Dan. Lon Harris joining me today. Thank you, Lon.
Always great to be here.
I was gone last week.
Yeah.
Missed the big or not so big opening of Dumbo, but
the opening, it came out.
The opening of Dumbo,
It got out there.
It released, and we'll speak about it a little bit later on the show. But thank you for watching. Sorry for the week off, but I'm back
You've
here.
earned it. You get one every now and again.
Yeah, every once in a while, and just in time for Shazam!
Exclamation point.
Nope, nothing. Okay. Just in time for Shazam to open, the #1 movie over the weekend. I've seen some differences in reporting because some people are including the special preview and some people are not. But I've seen when other movies have done it, they've included it in the opening box office. So I don't know why some people aren't.
It was like a week or two before they're not including
I don't know. Well, you know what? I am. Here on Charting with Dan, I am including every dollar that Shazam made this weekend and prior to this weekend. That means that it comes in about $56 million for the weekend, including the early previews. Even if you took that $3 million or so out that it did in early previews, it still performed a little bit higher than some expectations were going into the weekend, given its Thursday night previews. Overall, Juan, what do you think? We both saw Shazam.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was really terrific. It's interesting because this is the first, with Marvel now, we've seen their ability to kind of launch their like second and third tier characters. They've had great success with stuff like Guardians, characters that weren't necessarily as well known, but we haven't really seen DC try it that much. Like most of the time when DC's got a new movie, it's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, they're top tier guys. So it's interesting to see them start to now dig a little deeper.
And it performed equivalent in an equivalent nature to Ant-Man when Marvel did it. And there are similarities, as you mentioned. Shazam is certainly a very storied character in the DC universe, but not one of the marquee characters in the sense of even a Green Lantern or a Batman,
or
Superman,
a Flash,
Flash.
And I mean, it's not to take away, like, it's a classic character. It's a beloved character among comic book fans and a really important character in comic book history. But yeah, not as well known among casual fans as even someone like Aquaman. It's like, well, he's a super friend. He was on the animated shows. Like, he's kind of just as a pop culture artifact well known.
Obviously, Vincent Chase playing him in the James Cameron version was a big cultural milestone for Aquaman.
Of course, yeah.
So on with the opening, $56 million, good against projections, but I've seen a lot of discussion, and I want to kind of weigh into it as well. There's a lot of people going back and forth, like, what does this mean for Shazam? Is it a good opening? Is it not a great opening? Let's dig into the numbers a little bit. So we're going to do just that. So when we're talking about Shazam, first of all, in relation to the rest of the DCEU, it is the lowest 3-day opening weekend. Previously, that was Aquaman, but Aquaman came with a little bit of an asterisk because Aquaman opened on the 21st of December, on the Friday before Christmas. Those few days before Christmas are traditionally a bit lower grossing, and then there's a bonanza on the 24th, 25th, 26th, 20th. That's when it really starts to pick up, and you can see, obviously, because Aquaman did a huge amount of business. So it's not a one-to-one comparison looking at Shazam and Aquaman's opening weekends.
People are home. They've had a few days to get tired of their families. They're looking for stuff to go do. Movies are an appealing option.
But even when you take Aquaman off the table, Justice League opened $93 million, obviously a lot higher. So even taking special cases out, this was the lowest opening for any movie in the DCEU, which at first glance would appear to be not great. But there are some other things to talk about. First of all being, it also had the lowest budget of any movie in the DCEU. By a pretty healthy margin. Shazam had a reported $100 million budget. That's, I think, $50 million lower than its next competitor. Budget. When we talk about these films and everyone says, like, why is this opening? This movie opened here and you said it wasn't good, and that movie opened there and you said it was good. I was like, is it a double standard? Like, no, it's not. It's a budget that is so big.
Yeah.
When you're looking at how a movie did and how it's going to perform and how it's going to do long term.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you went into the casino and you put $10 down on your team to win 500, versus if you put 400 down to win 500, like, it's a lot bigger win when you put in only a few dollars.
So that's why I think that there hasn't been as much buzz around, like, oh, is Shazam in trouble? It's because the movie cost $100 million to make. Yes, of course, it had a very aggressive marketing campaign. You're probably going to, the conventional wisdom would say, perhaps double that figure when you're bringing in marketing, which is why we're going to talk about what the movie probably needs to do in the short term and what its projections are. But that's the first thing to keep in consideration when you're talking about Shazam and its box office, is that, yes, it did open lower than all of the other DCEU films, but it also cost much less as far as production budget goes than the other DCEU films. So that's the first thing to think about. The second thing to think about is, going forward, what are its prospects? Opening weekend, we've said it on the show, I'm going to have it tattooed on his arm or hung up on the set, is a part of the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not always the entire puzzle. What does Shazam have going for it going forward? Well, number one, it tied Wonder Woman for the highest cinema score of any film in the DCEU. Wonder Woman and Shazam are the only two movies to get an A cinema score from audiences.
Well done, audiences, because they're, to me, clearly the two best movies in this franchise.
Exactly. For me, those two are easily, for me, the two best movies in the DCEU. But audiences agree. We've talked about cinema score at length on this show before, but if you haven't heard us, long story short, an A cinema score is a very good indicator that the movie is getting very strong and healthy word of mouth, that you could see a multiple of 3 to 4 to even higher times the opening weekend, because people go see the movie. If they tell their friends that it was good, then their friends go see the movie. It's the old word of mouth.
Right. Which it's still very powerful.
It is still very powerful. So the low budget, the high cinema score, both very positive things in Shazam's corner. Also, it shouldn't be forgotten that there is a holiday weekend that happens in between now and Avengers Endgame, which is kind of the clock runs out moment for every movie in theaters at the end of this month.
Yeah.
You have the Easter holiday. We have Good Friday in there, which is a day off. It's not a box office bonanza in the sense of a lot of the other holidays, like a Memorial Day, for example.
Right.
But it is largely a day off school for a lot of elementary schools and colleges. You have some of the attractiveness of a 3-day weekend. It's in a couple of weeks, but you do have a little window there right before Avengers comes out where Shazam could possibly come in and make some more money on the back end, particularly if word of mouth is strong. So I think you have some stuff that are in Shazam's corner for its legs going forward. However, we have to qualify a couple other things that you have to sort of hedge your bets a little bit. Number one, it is not a particularly noteworthy opening weekend.
No.
In the sense of, it was 85th all time unadjusted, even amongst superhero movies. It's not going to go up there as one of the best opening movies of all time.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily to say that that's a bad thing, but it's not like, oh wow, Shazam surprised everybody. It did about what people thought it would do. But the other thing we have to look at worldwide, and where it doesn't have a lot to count on, is in China. Shazam, perhaps fittingly, not to rustle any feathers here, but perhaps fittingly had a release strategy that was almost identical to Captain Marvel's release strategy a few weeks ago. It opened in every single country simultaneously, except for Japan. Has not opened in Japan yet. It opened in an almost identical number, just I think maybe 50 to 100 fewer theaters than Captain Marvel did. But the difference being, overseas, particularly in China, it did not do that well. It actually came in second place for the weekend in China, behind another movie that we're going to talk about when we do the worldwide box office wrap-up. So it's not going to be a big hit in China. There's some projections there. They're looking at how it did. They said it could end up with around $50 million in China.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, Aquaman made $300 million in China. Of all of the DCEU movies released in China, which Suicide Squad was not, largely, some have said, because of the supernatural elements involved in the film, which are often a no-go for the Chinese market, it's going to have the lowest gross of any of the DCEU films, which is weird because we were just talking about Aquaman and how it blew the doors off, and wow, DC has really established a foothold. Shazam does not appear to be getting it. Part of it, I think, is the humor. Reportedly, may not quite translate as well to the Chinese audience.
That's what I was going to say. It more so than something like Aquaman, which is huge action, epic scale, very little dialogue in some sequences. You could really see how this translates everywhere.
Yeah.
Shazam is a little bit more like a family comedy. It's got a little bit more like a personal, emotional sort of side, and I feel like that's not translating as well necessarily to... Also, Aquaman, again, just like a more iconic, well-known character that probably is better established in the East than... Shazam, Captain Marvel, these sort of antiquated Western heroes.
So looking at the worldwide gross, that's going to be a big chunk of money that Shazam is not going to be getting.
Yeah.
That many of the other DC films had. Even Justice League, which was a worldwide disappointment, still made, I think, over $100 million in China. Shazam is not going to do that.
I mean, this is like sort of tying into what I was saying before. Like we're kind of seeing a pivot from DC, and it's going to maybe take a little while to figure out how well it's working. I mean, they're kind of moving out of the let's have one shared, interconnected universe where every movie builds on the last movie, which is a way to kind of lock in audiences for something like Justice League. Like, well, they've seen Batman v Superman, they've seen Man of Steel. They want to come watch the next one. Shazam isn't really being marketed that way. It doesn't feel like that. It's kind of more of a standalone.
Yeah.
So it might, we might see some more hits and misses based on the character of the movie.
But the difference being, again, talking about budget, yes, Justice League did way better in China. It also cost 3 times as much as Shazam.
Yeah.
So in the story of Shazam, I think a lot of it has yet to be written. I've seen a spectrum of opinions on this, from it was a really solid opening to it was a really disappointing opening. Just for my personal opinion, looking at it, like, I don't think it was necessarily a bad opening at all. It's not going to be a runaway hit in the sense of just like buckets on buckets on buckets on buckets of money. But I think if Warner Brothers is able to come out of this with a popular character, with a movie that will do well enough to justify potentially expanding this universe, and we know they're going to do it. The Rock has already talked about it.
Yeah.
We know who the sequel's going to be. We know who's going to be in it. And you're going to upgrade on just about every element from what you already have. So sometimes that works. Sometimes that doesn't work. But I think Warner Brothers is going to come out of this with enough of a profit. $150 million already, budget of $100 million. You'll probably get to at least, I would imagine, $300 million, which the budget times 3 is the mark that we talked about worldwide. What I'm going to be looking at next week is, does Shazam hold like a traditional superhero film, which is a drop of 55 to 60 to more percentage, or does it hold a little bit more like a comedy? We talked so much time about how comedies have very strong legs at the box office. They'll drop 25 to 30 to 35%. I'm going to be very curious to see which way Shazam drops. I suspect it might drop a little bit more like a comedy.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, again, like comedy, so much of it is word of mouth. It's not these pre-established characters everybody knows and they're eager to see what the new take is on this. It's like, oh, if something's funny, people will tell their friends, they'll tell their friends, and they're like, oh, I heard that was game night's supposed to be good, let's go see it. And I think that might happen with this, because there aren't maybe as many people who are like, I gotta rush out and see what their take is on Billy Batson.
Yeah.
But it might be people hear from people like us that it's funny, and then they're like, oh, it's funny, it's entertaining, it's a good standalone, I might go check it out.
Well, if the question is if Shazam is a hit or a miss, of course, everybody's got a different opinion. But for my 2 cents, I'm not saying it's a runaway hit, but I'm not calling it a miss either. And we'll see how it does in the weeks going forward, both internationally and domestically. So that's the story on Shazam. But there were other films that opened this weekend, believe it or not. One of them was the number 2 film, a Stephen King remake / adaptation, Pet Sematary, opened at number 2. Looking at Stephen King adaptations in unadjusted figures, that is the second highest opening for a Stephen King film, behind obviously It, which like quintupled. Anyway, it did like 5 times that much. It was a massive hit. But looking at those, he's had such a prolific career, and so many films have opened based on Stephen King books and novels and works and etc. I wanted to look at let's equal the playing field a little bit. So I went through and found adjusted numbers, adjusted for inflation, to see all time how does Pet Sematary stack up and what other films have opened very well for Stephen King based on his work. So these are the top 5 Stephen King openings based on inflation-adjusted numbers domestically.
Interesting.
It's still easily the number 1 film with $124 million. The Green Mile, number 2.
Oh, The Green Mile.
The Green Mile was a big hit when it came out 20 years ago, Lon. Can you believe it?
It is fascinating that Green Mile on there. A big reason for The Green Mile's huge popularity when it came out is a movie that is not on that list, The Shawshank Redemption, which is also a Stephen King adaptation from Frank Darabont, but that nobody saw in theaters.
And had come out at that point 5 years previous.
Yeah.
So people were, in a weird way, when The Green Mile came out, a lot of people were just starting to, through TBS and stuff, get into the cult of The Shawshank Redemption.
Green Mile coming out was during the height of everybody being like, did you ever go back and watch Shawshank Redemption? It's awesome.
Yeah. Number 3 is Pet Sematary. Cemetery, but not the one that came out last week. It's the 1989 version.
Wow, the Mary Herron one.
Yeah, that this version was remaking. That came in number 3. 1408 with John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. Number 4, Secret Window with Johnny Depp. At number 5.
Not one of the best ones.
Pet Cemetery would actually be number 6 on this list if you're looking at that. So if you're Paramount, you I'm sure after this certainly helped to greenlight this project. They put a lot of time and effort, and you pretty much equaled what happened back in 1989.
I have to say, I am surprised to not see one other movie on that list, Misery, which I was young when it came out, but I remember it was discussed at the time like a hit. Like people thought of it as a hit movie. So it's weird that it was sort of so
There
outpaced.
are several that are not on that list that were in like the $20-ish million range. Dreamcatcher was another one that was around the $20 million range, but Misery was up there. Like there's several that there's definitely a basement, but there's also about a $20 million range where a lot of Stephen King films have opened in the past. Misery was a huge hit, and also Misery from an era where opening weekend was not.
Yeah, it was not what it is now.
What it is now.
Movies would stay in theaters a lot longer, and people would sort of discover them over time.
Yeah. So, Pet Cemetery, weirdly, when you adjust for inflation, performed a little under what the original did. So.
I'm always curious too. The decision to misspell the title. I obviously it's a reference to the story because children made the Pet Cemetery sign, so it's misspelled. But in the age of SEO, when people are looking up movie titles, I wonder.
Well, is it? But I wonder if it'll be like a Santa Claus situation where everybody spells Santa Claus with an E
now
because the movie spelled. So now is SEMATARY going to become the new way to spell
Stephen
cemetery?
Did Stephen King teach us all how to spell cemetery wrong? Maybe
he may have.
Because I never remember how he fake spell. Every time I'm writing the title of that movie, I have to look it up to remember the fake spelling.
Every time I see cemetery spelled correctly, I think it's wrong. So maybe Stephen King has something to do with that. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Looking at the rest of the top 5, Dumbo in its second week. I didn't really get a chance to talk about it. It had a little bit of a disappointing opening last week, a little under what a lot of people thought it would do. It dropped 60% in its second. That's a horror movie drop.
I'm not shocked by this, though. It's not. When you think of Disney live-action remakes, the original movie's got to still be beloved for people to have that. It's got to be a Beauty and the Beast level current hit. And is Dumbo that for people?
Well, it certainly is not what Disney would want, because when you have a disappointing opening followed by a big drop, those are two things that you do not want to see go hand in hand.
That's just one of those movies. I feel like if you were challenging somebody, like how many Disney animated classics can you name off the top of your head? I feel like Dumbo is one of the ones that they would forget.
I mean, Lion King is going to have to be in release for 1 or 2 days for Disney to make up that shortfall.
Well, because that's one of those movies that just lives in everybody's head who was a kid at that time, and the idea of a new Lion King with new actors recreating these famous roles is like it's catnip. Who could no pun intended. Yeah, who could refuse? But Dumbo just doesn't have that cultural cachet, I don't think.
Let's look at where Dumbo's predecessors have been. These are the Disney remakes, how they've done in theaters after 10 days, which is where Dumbo is right now. And they were doing, at least the top 5, were all doing substantially better.
Sure.
Beauty and the Beast, obviously, at $320 million. This would be after 2 full weekends of release.
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland, The Jungle Book, Maleficent, Cinderella. I believe Dumbo would be number 6 on that list, but number 6 by a fairly substantial
and that's
margin.
all of them, right? I mean, it's
if you count 101 and 102 Dalmatians, Christopher Robin, and some of the other ones. But yeah, these are the top 5. Probably 2 of these are going to get bumped off throughout the summer.
Right. Because even Cinderella, I mean, Cinderella is a much older film and probably less stuck in everybody's mind than something like Beauty and the Beast. But still, it's like she's a Disney princess. You still get that kind of young girls love Cinderella.
Well, Cinderella's castle at Walt Disney World.
Who feels that way about Dumbo? It's just
Leonard
one of
Maltin.
the lesser...
Leonard Maltin loves Dumbo, but then didn't like the remake because he loved Dumbo so much. Yeah.
It's just the pink elephants part. That's the only part
The pink elephants is pretty good. They tried to do it in this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they should have left it. Whatever. That's a whole other thing. Let's finish out the domestic top 5 before we move on to the per theater average and the world. Us at number 4. It is now approaching Get Out's $176 million domestic total. And Captain Marvel at number 5. It is now the 8th highest grossing domestic film in the MCU. It has its eye on the $400 million domestic goal.
What a disaster. Yes, what a bomb. How embarrassing. I'm just kidding. It did great.
You said it. I said my piece on
We've
that.
heard the rant.
Let's move on to something. And Lon, I have a little explaining to do. I had a little explaining to do to myself. Let's move on to the top per theater grosser. Now, usually I've been saying top per screen grosser. As long as I've been doing this show, I've been saying top per screen grosser. And if you read almost any box office article or stuff, they will also say the top per screen grosser. But I was just kind of clicking around Box Office Mojo and a lot of the other sites that I use to help research and gather information. And I found I've been doing this wrong the entire time I've been doing the show. I've been doing it wrong. It's been explained to me incorrectly.
Yeah.
I have thusly explained it to others incorrectly, but it's been called the per screen average. And the way that I had read it, the way that it's covered in most corners of the internet is that when I give this number, which is that High Life, for example, was the number one per theater grosser with $24,835, I would say per screen, meaning I was under the understanding that it was playing on 4 individual screens.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, like the
country.
modern multiplex, you've got 6 theaters or 8 theaters, and that's that many screens.
Right. No. It's a per theater average,
Right.
meaning that High Life could be playing in 1 theater, but maybe on 2 separate screens.
Right.
But it's going to be reported as the gross for that 1 theater. So while High Life was playing in 4 theaters, it could have been playing on 6 screens or 8 screens. Again, I've explained this to people the exact opposite because that's how I understood it.
Well, why would you even call it a per screen average if what you're actually talking about is movie theaters, not movie screens?
And that's the thing is the people that are handling the numbers, most of them, they don't call it a per screen average.
Oh.
It's everybody who talks about the box office and then lists and does stories, the places where I honestly cut my teeth reading about the box office, the industry sites that listed as the per screen average, to the point where it just sort of soaked into my DNA that that's how it worked.
Well, that's what I
and
always
it wasn't until this last week that I actually found this thing that explained what this number means, and it's not per screen, it's per theater. And this has gone into how I analyze things like Captain Marvel, etc. I'm sure this will open the door for plenty of people to be like, aha!
I was right.
I would be happy to explain to you how, while that could make a difference, it doesn't make much of a difference. As we mentioned, it made $1 billion.
It made $1 billion. It's a big hit, everybody.
But I could just change it. I could just change it to say per theater and continue reporting it and never mention it, and it would just change it to the top per theater average. But I think it's important. Number one, that was part of the whole thing that I went through with the whole video that I made a few weeks ago. Is I think it's important when you have a misperception, when you make a mistake, when you understand something differently. If I didn't explain how I was doing it differently, then I don't think you watching at home would understand how I was interpreting things differently. And it's important if it's fine if you misunderstand something. I would much rather be clear on what that number means, and I'd much rather you watching at home be clear. So it's not going to be the top per screen average anymore. It's going to be top per theater average. So now that we're all on the same page, High Life had the top per theater average. It was playing in 4 theaters nationwide. It grossed $24,835 in each of those theaters. This is a film from French director Claire Denis. It stars Robert Pattinson, Juliette Binoche, Andre Benjamin.
It's a astronaut drama.
It's an astronaut drama, but it also, I haven't seen it yet. It looks like one of the most A24 films that is ever A24. Just dark and weird and sinister.
Yeah,
and
Pattinson said it's one of the weirdest movies he's ever been in, and he's been in some weird movies.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
There you go. High Life. It'll be expanding probably, who knows?
Over the
more
next
theaters
few
over the next couple
we'll
weeks.
probably add a few screens.
Seek it out. I'm sure it'll probably be one of those that's not for everybody, but I'm going to check it out.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah.
Let's look at the top 5 around the world. Shazam is the number 1 movie, $158 million. So basically made back its budget plus $50 million in the first week. Not a bad start worldwide. As I mentioned, it's open in every major international market except for Japan.
I wonder if that poster hurt it. The poster's not great. I don't know if that lets me know what's going on with that movie.
Well, there are lots of posters. I chose that poster because that's the one that I associate
with the blowing bubble. I don't know if it really sells anybody over age 8.
That was an early poster. There were other posters that came out that may have sold the movie better. I don't know why. I like that poster a lot. Dumbo is number 2, another $50 million, followed by Pet Sematary, largely driven by its domestic debut. P-Storm, we mentioned that. Stop it, you immatures. P-Storm.
We call it P-Storm.
P-Storm. No, I'll call it P-Storm and try to say it with a straight face. P-Storm was the number 1 film in China over the weekend. It is the 4th in a series of Hong Kong crime films. Follow Z-Storm, L-Storm, S-Storm, and now P-Storm is the 4th one.
It must make sense if you've seen those movies. Those letters are not in order, but I trust them.
Well, yeah, and I may have switched up a couple ones, but P-Storm is definitely the latest one, and it's alphabetically it is the 3rd in the series, but it is the 4th in the film series. So there you go. P-Storm was the number 1 movie in China over the weekend. It's the movie that bumped Shazam down to 2nd place.
You don't want to get caught up in the P-Storm.
You don't want to get caught up in the P-Storm. So that was the number 4 worldwide grosser. Oh, we're so immature. And then at number 5, Captain Marvel. I wasn't here last week to report this. It has now crossed $1 billion. It is the 7th MCU film to achieve that feat. It is currently the 30th highest grossing film of all time worldwide, moving toward $1.1 billion. We'll see where it ends on that list. But Captain Marvel.
What a disaster.
Another $1 billion grosser for Disney worldwide. Let's take a look at the domestic charts for 2019, see if there's been any movement. This is reflective of 2 weeks since I was gone last week. Us, now the 3rd highest grosser of the year domestically. It passes Glass. The Upside, number 5. Captain Marvel, How to Train Your Dragon, still up there, right up there at number 1 and 2, although it looks like Us is probably going to overtake How to Train Your Dragon 3, which is pretty surprising. Dumbo right there at number 8. We lost What Men Want, and Escape Room stays on the list. I was looking at it.
Wow.
It literally stayed on that list by like $13,000 out of 56 million. Shazam almost jumped into the top 10 at right there. So that is going to be in the top 10. Escape Room will be out of the top 10 next week.
By Escape Room.
But yeah, Escape Room
held in there.
Barely. It escaped being knocked out of the top 10 by Shazam.
That's a January release. They did well.
Oh,
good job.
We'll see it worldwide. Well, I think it's off the worldwide chart, but that movie did crazy. There's going to be, of course, a sequel.
The fact that we're still talking about it in April is pretty impressive.
That's pretty impressive. Let's look at the top 10 worldwide for 2019. Captain Marvel, as I mentioned, the number 1 film of the year. It's broken $1 billion. The only movie thus far to do so, although I know that we're going to have at least 3 or 4 more, possibly from the same company, that are also going to do that this year. Probably. The Wandering Earth, How to Train Your Dragon, Alita, and Crazy Alien, Pegasus, Glass, they all stay the same. But Us jumps onto the list at number 8, $215 million worldwide. Wow. Dumbo jumps onto the list at number 9, $213 million worldwide. Lego Movie 2 is in danger of dropping off. And we did lose Escape Room and Extreme Job, which, if you haven't watched the show, is once again about undercover cops in Korea who open a fried chicken restaurant.
It's very extreme.
It sounds like a very extreme job that I still haven't seen. I'm looking to catch it hopefully when it comes out here stateside on home video, because home video, like an old man.
1980s.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
on
streaming.
Home video. I can't wait to spool it up.
I'm looking forward to that VHS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be Kind Rewind. This week opening Missing Link, which is the latest film from Laika.
Yeah.
It looks hilarious, which means that it's probably going to open low and make far less money than it deserves to. That seems to happen to every Laika film.
Every time. And yet they keep going. Good for them.
Hellboy, which I have not seen.
No,
and I don't know if I'm going to get to see before it opens. As of now, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So I might have to go see it at some other point. And
I'm going to go see that with the plebes. I'm excited.
Come on.
Oh, I see every movie with it. I get like 1 screening a year. Come on.
Little, which is a Universal comedy that's opening this week.
We're bringing Body Switch back, right?
We're bringing Body Switch. We have 2 Body Switches movies in a row. We've got Shazam and now Little.
Yeah.
Right in a row.
I'm a big fan of the 80s Body Switch genre.
And then we have After, which is based on YA Harry Styles fan fiction.
Really?
Well, it was it's kind of like now I've heard that fans of these books don't like it. I'm not comparing it in content to 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, I get it. How 50 Shades of Grey was originally
in origin
Twilight.
to 50 Shades of Grey, and that 50 Shades of Grey was originally Twilight fan fiction. After, which is hitting theaters, which originally Harry Styles fan fiction, which then got a huge following and then was published as actual literature.
Well,
and is now a film.
we keep calling these things fan fiction, but like fan fiction has come so far. It's been decades now that people are doing it. It's really just people who like to write and they post things and they put celebrities and famous characters in their writing.
Yes.
But there's no real difference from like somebody writing short stories and somebody writing fan fiction. I just want to put that out there.
I disagree with your police work a little bit there, Lon.
Really?
But
I mean, if I write a story and I put
difference.
Harry Styles in it versus I make up somebody's name, I mean, we can see that the story itself, that you can change the names and it doesn't matter. It's not like 50 Shades of Grey when you're watching it, you're like, well, this is a ripoff of Twilight. You're like, well, this is terrible. But you're not like, well, it's a ripoff of Twilight. It could be its own thing.
You know what, Lon? This is a great debate to have.
Right now.
It's strap in, folks. No, that's a great debate to have. We'll put a pin on that. We should like figure out like a movie fight or some.
I would
forum
love
have
to
that kind
discuss
of debate.
fan fiction, but not now.
But not now.
It's not charting related.
It's not charting related. So we're gonna push that debate off until later. Lon Harris, thank you for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
I had to wait right until you took a swallow so that you'd have to have that awkward silence.
I love to be here.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back next week. Did David Harbour resurrect Hellboy? Did After surprise everybody?
So.
Did Little have big box office? Did Missing Link
Find
open?
its
I don't know.
link?
Yeah, I don't know. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Thanks for watching. See you next week.